explores a subversive piece of literature from antebellum New Orleans. Especially in the years just before the Civil War, the United States was a nation brutally divided by race. Out of a population of 12 million, a third were slaves, consigned by the color of their skin to a life of oppression and harsh labor. Yet, in the port of New Orleans, a community of mixed-race people had carved out a unique place for themselves, owning businesses, traveling overseas, and publishing their own newspapers. A faded manuscript has recently been unearthed that may shed light on how this extraordinary community grew, prospered, and eventually helped challenge the cruelties of slavery. The heirloom belongs to Charlie Martinez of Chicago, Illinois.
This manuscript has been in my family for ages, perhaps 150 years, but no one knows the story behind it.
I'm starting my investigation with a few questions for Charlie.
So, Charlie, what do you have to show me?
I've got a manuscript, one that's been in our family for a very long time.
Wow, it is old. It's all written in French, isn't it?
Yes, I can't read French, so I don't know what's in it.
Well, I can, but it'll be hard to read some of this. They're very faint. Do you know anything else about this?
My brother had seen it with my grandmother's dresser, and then when she died, my father gave it to my brother. They seem to be poems and songs.
One name in the manuscript caught Charlie's eye, a female, Sylvanie Duplessis.
You'll see Duplessis in the margin right here.
Although his family tree includes the Duplessis clan several generations ago, there's no mention of a female named Sylvanie.
Do you know anything else about this early family?
They all lived in New Orleans. All of them were listed as either black or mulatto, which means they were mixed race, which was very common in New Orleans at that time.
Charlie, tell me what you'd like for me to find out about this manuscript.
We'd like to know what is this manuscript.
I'll have to take both of these with me, but I'll be very careful with them. The paper itself seems to be very high quality, which suggests it was made before the Civil War, when the quality of paper went down as it was mass-produced. There's 70 pages, bound together with a simple string binding, I would say probably handmade.
It's very difficult to read. Much of it appears to be romantic era poetry. One poem is called Au bord du lac, which translates as beside the lake.
This is smudged. I would say this is, come, oh my loved one, the breeze has calmed and the day ends. The ink is fairly faded, light brown ink. Every few pages there's something in either blue or red ink. There seem to be corrections of spelling and changes in the words. Then there's this sweet little doodle of a flower and something else. Looks almost childlike. I've never heard of any of these poets, so the first thing for me to do is to find out more about these writers.
I'm searching the names, and several appear in a book titled Creole Echoes.
Here's Del Cruz, a free man of color, born in New Orleans. Free Creoles of color. Here's this phrase again. Liotto is a Creole of color. What does this Creole of color mean?
Creole, yes, but I've never heard that expression. Here's the distinction. Creole first meant native-born, then mixed race. One group, concentrated in Louisiana, called themselves Creoles of color to describe the offspring of unions between white men and women of color, most of whom were free. Charlie said his ancestors were mixed race, or mulatto, from New Orleans. Some of these poets also had mixed ancestors. I sent digital images of the manuscript to Brooklyn College literature professor, Regine Matotu, who studies the French-speaking African diaspora.
Oh, I feel like I'm handling a question about it.
Creoles of color were a unique community in Louisiana in the 19th century.
They wanted to be looked at and viewed as a separate group, not white and not black, but quite distinct from them.
Until the U.S. purchase of Louisiana in 1803, New Orleans had been a French and then a Spanish colonial city. Lejeune explains that its Creole population was inspired by the radical ideas of the French Revolution and the slave uprising in the French colony of Haiti.
A lot of people travel too, back and forth, you know, from Haiti to Louisiana to France, that produced that very special class and group of people at the turn of the century.
The Creoles of color in Louisiana carved out a special niche for themselves. They enjoyed rights and social privileges unheard of anywhere else in the South. They could own businesses, travel, and even possess slaves. But like all people of color in America, they could not vote, attend public schools, hold public office, or marry whites.
They sort of felt entrapped in an English-speaking country where their gifts were not appreciated.
Lejeune doesn't know what our manuscript is, and she can't account for its odd markings. But she has made an important discovery.
This is a translation of the 1845 publication of Lessener. And this is a collection of poems by Creole writers of the early 19th century.
She explains that in 1845, a Creole of color named Armand Lanus had published Lessener, the first anthology of poetry by writers of color in the U.S.
Although that's one of the poems in our manuscript.
It is one of 5 poems that I identified both in the manuscript that you brought and the 1845 publication of Lessener.
So you're suggesting there could be some direct connection between our manuscript and Lessener.
There is a definite connection. It is extremely exciting that they are in both versions.
So, there are 5 cases where the same poet's work appears in both manuscripts, including Lanus, Dalcourt, Liottot, all Creoles of color. Lejeune suggests I head to New Orleans, where the historic New Orleans collection houses the world's largest body of French Creole writing. I sent the manuscript on ahead to historian Dana Kress for evaluation.
So what do you think?
Quinn, you've brought me a manuscript that's very rare and very special.
Now, rare in what sense?
It's very rare to have any collection written by Creoles of color from this period.
He's made a significant discovery. Along with the Romantic era poetry, he's identified some radical writings.
In fact, some of them could be considered almost revolutionary at the time. Le Négrier, that means the slave ship, and it's a work that would have been dangerous to possess in New Orleans pre-Civil War.
It was written in the early 1800s by a white Frenchman. I'm certainly surprised to see it here. Lejeune had told me that throughout the antebellum South, it was illegal to publish anything that might incite a slave rebellion.
It begins, he was stolen away from the shores of Guinea in Africa. He comes to Louisiana, and in Louisiana, he waters the ground with his tears and his sweat and refuses to eat. And one day he refuses to work anymore, and the master comes in and says, go work, and he says, no, I choose to be a free man, and I'd rather die as a free man than live as a slave.
That's very powerful during those years. I thought it was illegal.
It was absolutely illegal because this was considered to be the sort of document that could lead to slave revolt. So whoever was responsible for putting this book together was really going out on a limb at the period. There was a whole group of Creole writers and men of letters who did take those chances and who did stand up to the abuse of power that you had. Now, I have had the library here bring out a manuscript because it reminds me very much of the manuscript that you had found. This is a collection of poetry by a man named Pierre Aristide Desdunes. The writing is very similar to what you see in the manuscript that you've brought me.
The Desdunes manuscript also includes romantic poems and other more radical writings.
Within this document, there are many, many references to revolution and revolutionary thought.
Dana explains that the author of this manuscript had attended a private school in New Orleans, the Couvent School.
The Couvent School was a very special place. it was a school for orphans of color and also for any of the Creoles of color who wanted to give a very good education to their children. There are writings in both works by the Creole intelligentsia of the period, and there are so many connections that everything leads to that school.